Makes a huge difference if you'll do me a favor by subscribing and liking the podcast wherever you listen. It goes a long way. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy. Julian Treasure is a sound and communication expert whose mission is to help people and organizations to listen better and create healthier and more effective sound, including speaking. His TED Talks have been viewed over 150 million times. He is the author of How to Be Heard, Sound Business, and his newest book, Sound Effects, which came out this year. He has regularly been featured on BBC television and radio, along with NBC's Today Show. You can find out more about him by visiting his website, juliantreasure.com. In this conversation, we discuss the importance of becoming a better listener and communicator. I hope you enjoy. All right, Julian, welcome to the Wisdom of Life.
Thank you very much, Chad. A pleasure to be here.
I wanted to ask you, how did you become interested in sound and how it affects the power of our communication? Like when did that start for you?
I think for me, probably very young. I had a wise mother who, when I was aged probably about 6, I think, bought me a young person's guide to the orchestra, Carnival of the Animals, Peter and the Wolf, classic pieces of music written for children to enjoy, classical music, but for children. And I absolutely loved them. So I listened to those endlessly. And as I got older, obviously my musical tastes changed somewhat. I started to play an instrument myself. Music had become, very, very important to me very young. And it's remained central in my life ever since. Music is fundamental to who I am as a person. So, for example, I can't understand when I go on a train and I see people reading a book and listening to music. I can't understand how they do that. I can't do that because music takes over everything for me. When I've got music going on, it's very hard for me to do anything else. That's why I find background music quite disconcerting, because it's hard for me to have a conversation when there's music on. I'm listening to the music. So yeah, playing music, it creates a different listening. If you're in a band or an orchestra, you have to listen to all of the other players at the same time, and you have to listen very attentively. And meanwhile, you're doing something very complicated yourself. So it's not surprising that we now know, Oliver Sacks wrote about this, that the brains of musicians are bigger than the brains of non-musicians. It's a bit of the brain called the corpus callosum, which connects the two hemispheres. I write about this in my new book, Sound Effects, as well, because there are many neural benefits and life benefits to being a musician, just apart from the joy of making music. It enhances all sorts of skills, because if you think about it, you're doing this very complicated thing. Like a violinist is moving both hands in very complex ways, probably also reading and decoding a complicated code, which is dots on a page, to tell him or her what to play next, while also listening to the whole orchestra, to every other instrument, for context and for appreciation and to be part of that, and probably watching a conductor at the same time. That is very complicated. So it's not surprising it taxes your neurology and it lights up every part of the brain pretty much when you're doing that. We now know that hearing and listening are holographic. They don't get done in one bit of the brain. Many parts of the brain are involved in that process. So I think, I grew up with this kind of attentive listening, and then I had a short career as a professional musician, got very broke, as most professional musicians do, unless you're very, very good or very, very lucky. That is the fate of most musicians. And then I had a long career in advertising and then marketing, eventually started my own business producing magazines for clients like Lexus, Apple, Microsoft, people like that, customer magazines. But all the way through, I was thinking, why aren't these companies listening? They don't spend anything. There's no attention being given to the sound they're making. They don't even think about it. You talk about a brand and immediately they think about how does it look? So that was a really big question. And so when I sold that business in 2002, I started a company called The Sound Agency, which I then ran for 20 years, an audio branding company. So that's asking the question, how does your brand sound, and answering it. It's a very important question to ask and answer. Not for every brand is it very, very significant. I mean, if you're making a pair of trousers, there's not a great deal of sound associated with the product, but there may be with the brand. So you can think of many brands. Intel, I bet you can't draw the Intel logo, but as soon as I say Intel, you're probably hearing da 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 da. Everybody knows that very famous Sonic logo. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars to Intel. So these little sounds and the sounds in the spaces you run, your workspaces, offices, showrooms, shops, shopping malls, all sorts of spaces, restaurants, bars. The sound is very, very influential. And that I came to understand with 20 years in the sound agency. I did a lot of research at the beginning, came up with my 4-way sound effects structure, which I haven't had to change in 25 years. And then I got to do the TED Talks and started writing books and so forth. It became more and more of a focus as I worked in the sound agency. And I'll tell you what, actually, Chad, where it really changed, I had an epiphany. I think it was when I did my 3rd TED Talk, which was on listening, as I realized the reason all these brands and companies make all this noise and don't think about it is because they're full of people who are not listening. And that is when I realized, actually, I completely agree. There's a great quote from Ernest Hemingway where he says, "I like to listen. I've learned a great deal by listening carefully. Most people never listen." And that, sadly, is the truth. So that's become my mission on this planet, to regenerate listening, which used to be a primal, absolutely fundamental part of our consciousness for safety, for connection with other people, for connection with the planet we live on. And we've lost it. We've lost it so much, it's terrifying. And the result we see around us all over the place: political polarization, disconnection, the stats on young people's disconnection and anxiety and stress and, suicide figures. They are terrifying. And to me, the root of all of this is that we've forgotten how to listen. So that's where I am right now. So there's a long answer to your first question.
I love long answers to short questions in this, especially in this format. So keep it coming. Thank you. How did that process evolve with us forgetting how to listen consciously?
Well, it started, I think, with moving into cities, which became noisy. If you concentrate people into a smaller space, we are a noisy bunch, and that's what happens. There are records. So I write about this again in the book. And the history of sound is quite interesting. The history of noise is quite interesting. It's not a completely modern phenomenon. There are records of citizens in ancient Rome complaining about the noise of carts in the streets outside and so forth. In Victorian times, street hawkers who used to stand calling. I mean, you remember this famous scene in Oliver, the musical. They've created a song around this, but it used to be a big thing in Victorian cities where street callers were outside, and they used to drive the residents mad. There were fights and so forth. So noise is not a modern thing. In fact, when the motor car was invented, people were very excited about it reducing the noise levels in the world, because pneumatic tires were much quieter than horses' hooves and rumbling wooden wheels. Little did they know. So it's been a phenomenon of bringing people together. Density of population is critical. And certainly now the noisiest places on this planet are cities. And, there's a table in my book, and it lists, based on United Nations data, it lists Dhaka in Bangladesh as the noisiest city in the world, averaging over 120 decibels. That's rock concert loud. That is deafening and also damaging to hearing, quite apart from anything else. So noise is severe, and it obviously got much, much worse after the Industrial Revolution, when we invented machines. So suddenly we had steam, and then electricity, we had engines, machines, and now we have people drilling in streets, we have construction, we have airplanes, we have cars, we have diesels, we have buses with air brakes, making us jump out of our skin when it happens behind us. We have trains going through stations at high speed. If you've ever had that happen to you when you weren't looking, that's a pretty frightening thing as well. So noise is just behind air pollution now as a killer, and a huge influence on health in a negative way. It costs billions and billions and billions of dollars a year in every country, but it's a hidden problem. You don't get many politicians saying, "Vote for me, I'll make it quieter."
Yeah.
It's ignored. Because actually what's happened, Chad, the sad thing is, as the noise has gone up, we have become deaf. We have, as a kind of natural response to this noise, we've suppressed our consciousness of sound. Most of it's not very nice. Most of it's accidental. It's just the byproduct of stuff that people are doing, people moving around largely, or building things, or whatever it might be. Noise, noise, noise. It's inevitable. We just shrug our shoulders and get on with it. So I see two people standing in the street having a shouted conversation next to somebody who's drilling. And I just think, why don't you move? But we don't. I travel on the tube in London sometimes, and some of the tube lines have got terrifying levels of noise where the train's going round a bend and the wheels are squealing as it comes into a station. I have my fingers in my ears because I value my hearing. But I look down the station in amazement as everybody's just standing there accepting this truly devastating level of piercing shriek. So, we just get used to suppressing it. So that's the biggest reason, I think, why we've lost our listening. And then there's a couple more. We have technology. So everybody's now communicating with their fingers and their eyes. Writing was only invented 5,000 years ago. We've been using complex language for probably 100,000 years. And Homo sapiens has been around for 300,000 odd years. For a couple of 100,000 years before that, we were communicating with non-verbal sound. So grunts and moans and singing and whatever it might be. I love Stephen Mythen's book, The Singing Neanderthals. It's worth a read if you haven't seen that, where he talks about this kind of proto-language, he calls it. And before that, even, 3 million years of evolution of hominids leading up to us, they weren't silent, but they were listening, always listening. Because if you're going to go into a cave and try and live there, you better be listening in case there's something else in there. If you're out hunting, you better be listening in case there's something bigger or nastier than you coming from behind you. So listening used to be survival and hunting and food and mates and social. Everything came from, that's how we communicated. All human language was communicated by speaking and listening, or grunting and listening earlier. Since we invented writing, it's decayed. We've taken over. Writing has come up on the rails and taken pole position to the point where we now teach our children how to read and write, not how to speak or listen. This is crazy. If we taught our children first how to listen really well, how much more of their education would they receive? How different a world would we be in if people knew from a very young age the importance of listening, the fact that listening is a skill. It's different from hearing. Hearing is a capability. It's a very important one. Sadly, a damaged capability. 1 in 4 of the world's population now has damaged hearing, partly due to noise, disease, whatever it might be. But a lot of it's noise related. And it gets worse as you get older, of course. I've got damaged hearing. I was a drummer for 30 years, and that does some damage. So I've lost everything above about 12 kilohertz in both ears. It's not devastating. I'm quite lucky in that way, but there are a lot of people who have got devastating hearing loss, and it's debilitating, it's humiliating, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it. It's embarrassing. So they don't go and get a hearing aid. They just pretend, or eventually start isolating. Don't go, not going out to social functions because you can't hear people. Not putting yourself in that position. I remember I was on a train only about a month ago, sitting opposite an elderly couple, and he was pretty profoundly deaf, I'd say. And her relationship with it was painful to watch. She was just so angry with him the whole time. Everything was, come on, you idiot, this kind of thing, because he was unable to hear what she was saying unless he went, huh? And leant forward. It was very sad to see. And that's what can happen. If hearing gets damaged, it destroys relationships and it disconnects people. So we've got that. I mean, that's one problem in the world, but the not listening, overlaying that is far greater, I think, because when you've lost, you don't even realize listening is a skill. It's something you can practice, master, become adept at. Now, if you don't practice it and you don't master it, you don't even know it's a skill, you just leave it, then most of the time we don't do it. There's the old, no, I am listening. No, you're sending a text. You're tapping away at your fingers. That's not listening. It's very partial listening. So my whole thing now is what I call conscious listening. That's what my book is about. It's what my new online community, the Listening Society, is all about. It's what I teach, what I speak about in keynotes all over the world, and what I do workshops on. The idea is there's no one right or wrong way to listen. It's not on or off. There are a plethora of what I call listening positions, places to listen from, ways to listen, if you like. So partial listening is fine a lot of the time when somebody's telling you a little joke and you're cooking or doing something else, not a problem. But if it's your child coming home from school and they're in tears and something's happened, that's not appropriate, And there are many ways of listening which can be very damaging to relationships, like critical listening. We've all come across somebody who's immensely critical, unable to do anything but be judgmental of people. So that child might come home in tears because they didn't do great in the test. Well, why? What went wrong? What did you do? That's not paternal. That's not paternal or maternal. That's not great parenting. It's not heartfelt. Because you might want to move from critical listening or judgmental listening into empathic listening. So I think listening is it's a huge encyclopedia that people haven't opened, a glorious, richer way to live life, to become a more conscious human being, to deepen relationships, to become a greater leader, salesperson, parent, friend, whatever it is that you want to do in life is enhanced by being a better listener. And that's why I think it's tragic that we don't teach it in schools. We've lost it around the world, noise, technology, just lack of consciousness of it. And it, as I said earlier, it's having this devastating effect that you can see all around you. This is increasing at a rate of knots right now. You only have to look at the comments under any YouTube video or any piece in even a quality newspaper. Look at the comments, and it's vituperative, hateful, judgmental, angry. This whole thing of demonizing people. It's all about being right, and that's a basic human desire. We want to be right. But unfortunately, it's been kind of amped up with technology. And so the easiest way to be right is to make somebody else wrong. And that is what we're doing so much of the time now, is judging other people, condemning people. It's kind of an addiction to blaming, to being outraged. Who's to blame for this? Somebody must be punished. Somebody's wrong here. And if that's the way we're listening to the world, it's so confrontational, so divisive, and it's fragmenting our societies. It's an enormous danger to democracy, because to me, democracy relies on listening. How can I live next to you if I fundamentally disagree with you, if I don't make the effort to understand? I'm sorry, this is another very long answer, but that brings me on to a thing which I think is absolutely critical and is missing in the world as the result of this not listening, and that thing is validation. Chad, I really don't agree with what you just said, but I can see why you believe that. That is completely different from Chad, that's crap, which is just going to create conflict, and it's judgmental. And it's my opinion. It's not even a truth. It's my opinion. So validation is, is something that's almost evaporated out of the world altogether. The idea that a political party could validate the opposition's point of view. Say, well, okay, we don't agree with that, but we see that there's some merit in the way you're thinking. It's not what we're going to do, but we understand that. No. They can't say that. They just rubbish anything that's coming from the other side. And it's always two sides now. So I think we're in a powerless position worldwide. Conflict, war, we're seeing it popping up more and more in the world. Conflict between communities, judgmentalism, fighting, violence, anger. I am concerned for the way the world's moving. And I can tell you, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, but it's based on a lot of research, the missing factor is listening. That's what we've lost.
Yeah, and do you think by not teaching this at a young age, not studying the science and art of listening consciously, that we're creating a more dangerous world?
Definitely, no question about it. Dangerous. I mean, I have two young children, 10 and 4, and I'm concerned for the world they're growing up in, both in terms of, armed conflict, but also just in terms of how people are starting to relate to other people and think this is normal. So on the one hand, we've got the obsession with celebrity, which is creating these wafer-thin sort of faux relationships. That's where a lot of people think they know the celebrity, think they're their friend, they wear the same clothes, they try and do the same things, whatever it may be. Well, they don't know them. It's completely false, but it's possibly in many people's lives the strongest relationship they've got. Many, many young people are uncomfortable with verbal communication, with phone calls, with face-to-face. We hear this more and more in companies interviewing people and so forth, saying they can't communicate. And they're much happier with a bit of text, with instant messaging or texting somebody. Well, I can understand that, when it's breaking up with somebody in a relationship, you don't necessarily want to see them, or asking somebody out, you don't want to face the rejection face to face. I can see that in certain situations, but it becomes habitual. Ever since we invented email, one of the great evils of the world, if you ask me. I don't know how many emails you get, Chad, but I am fed up with it. I can't tell you. It's constant stress, constant feeling of overwhelm. It is just it's just not good. It's not good for us. And I grew up, I'm quite old now, but I grew up getting my first job in the early 80s when you used to send letters to people and expect a response in a week or two. You used to phone people up and have a chat with them. And life proceeded at a much more sedate pace. Now, you send an email to somebody and you're outraged they haven't replied within 15 minutes. What's going on? Did you get my email? We want instant response the whole time. Everything's got to be instant. So there's a wonderful sequence in my book. I talked to George Prochnik, who wrote a lovely book called In Pursuit of Silence, which was also the name of a lovely film, by the way, if you ever get a chance to watch it, which I was honored to be in, directed by Patrick Shen. It's a beautiful film about noise and silence and listening. But the book was a separate thing. George was saying to me, which I quoted in my book, he was watching some kids watching Sesame Street not so long ago. And he was amazed by how full on it was. Noisy, fast cutting, high energy. So he went to a video rental store, I think there was still one near him at that time, and got out a video of the early days of Sesame Street and put it on. He said it was like watching Sesame Street on Quaaludes. It was so quiet, so peaceful, so different from the modern version. That's what's happened to us. So, there aren't many bits of children's entertainment that aren't kind of fast-paced, exciting. I mean, there's one I love, which I watch with my children, Bluey. Have you ever seen Bluey?
Yes.
Bluey is magnificent because it does not have that obligation to fast pace. It takes its time. It's really about relationships. Highly recommended to any parent to watch with children. It's very educational in lots of good ways. But I love that it hasn't got this frenetic, fast cut, urgent, grabbing your attention thing going on, which so much of the entertainment we have now is. It's either always on, like news. Yep. So Frank is outside the house right now. Frank's, what's happening? Well, nobody's come in or gone out. Is that news? Is that really news? I don't think so. Nothing's happened. That's not news. We get a huge amount of that. Reporters standing outside places saying nothing's happened. Well, it's because we have this desire to be knowing everything. It's a very different world to how it was 100 years ago. You knew hardly anything. Many people couldn't even read. And if they could, they weren't reading newspapers. So you used to know what was going on around you. You knew your neighbors deeply. You had your family. You'd have a few deep relationships and know your little community. Now we have replaced that with large numbers of very shallow relationships, including, as I say, fake ones with celebrities lying on top of the whole thing. And it's not surprising to see those terrifying stats on young people's mental health around the world. It's not just one country, it's all over the world. Alienation, discontent, dissatisfaction, depression, anxiety, all this stuff about body image. I mean, social media obviously is largely to blame for this, but not solely to blame. It's a kind of inevitable acceleration combined with thinning of everything that is human, which I find very concerning. And again, I think listening is the antidote. It's the opposite of what I see young people doing a great deal, which is entertaining 2 or 3 different streams of input at the same time. A phone, a TV, a call, maybe an iPad or a game station as well, all at the same time. So we're kind of replacing what once we had intimacy with somebody. It's being replaced with intensity, adrenaline. So there's this addiction to adrenaline on the one hand and dopamine on the other. Oh, somebody just tagged me, makes me feel good. Dopamine hit. And this kind of doom scrolling that's going on with TikTok, 10-second reels and all this kind of stuff. It's getting far. I don't know where it ends. Where do we end? 1-second reels? I don't know.
Yeah.
I last time I met Chris Anderson, the head of TED, he was concerned that people's attention span wouldn't even let them watch an 18-minute TED talk. When, an 18-minute TED talk contains very largely, or most often, contains wonderful nuggets of wisdom or transformative perspectives or whatever it may be. 18 minutes, you can't be bothered to give that to that. Where do we go with this? And I know there are, American educators who are in despair about what they're dealing with in their classes, the doom scrolling there, everybody sitting there with laptops or phones out, not paying any attention, inability to read a book, no patience. So they just, chat GPT and AI is coming in and amplifying all this. I saw a great time. There was a funny cartoon the other day, I think it was in Private Eye in the UK, where the teacher is dismissing the class and say, okay, well, if you could get your AI to send the essays in to my AI for marking, that would be great. Where we're going. So, yes, listening is important. And that's why I've launched the Listening Society, and it's what the book Sound Effects is all about. It's a plea to listen in a world that's forgotten how. And that's what I'm all about now.
Wow. Thank you for your efforts, Julian. Pun intended, you are a gift, you are a treasure to the world.
Thank you.
Why don't we teach listening more or at all in schools to young children?
That is a fantastic question. And it's one I've pondered a great deal. I think probably initially it was kind of taken for granted. I mean, it certainly was a big part of education in, for example, ancient Greece, where music was part of, or harmony was part of the classical tripos, along with mathematics, arithmetic, logic, and rhetoric. So, speaking and listening were fundamental in those days. Even though they had writing, the writing had been invented by then, nevertheless, they really rated rhetoric, the ability to speak powerfully and well, and music, harmony, because they had this theory that, music was just a pale reflection. The reason we love music, they said, is it's a pale reflection of the harmony of the spheres, of the harmony of the universe. And they equated health and harmony quite strongly, which, of course, is something we've got many, many, many sound healers, music therapists, and so forth working today who would be moving down that track quite strongly, saying health and harmony very strongly related. So somewhere it got lost, maybe after the Middle Ages. I don't know, when we started teaching writing. I mean, of course, writing, I said, came along 5,000 years ago, but it wasn't generally available. In most societies, it was only the elite who could read and write for a very long time, probably until, again, the Industrial Revolution and the kind of democratization of education in that way. People coming off the land, coming into cities, getting jobs in factories, having children in much denser population densities, and therefore schools. And, the charitable Victorians were very rigid on this. For some reason, it was reading and writing they considered 3 R's, wasn't it? Reading, writing, and arithmetic, instead of speaking and listening. Maybe they were taken for granted. But to my knowledge, they've never been on the curriculum. And I know, in your country, public speaking is something that most schools will pay at least some attention to. You have, speaking competitions and debating competitions and things like that. Far less so in my country, in the UK and in Europe, as far as I know. Listening, however, almost no schools pay any attention at all to it. Now, there is a slight move in the UK right now towards what they're calling oracy, which is the counterpart to literacy, which is spoken communication. I have yet to see that coming into any syllabus, and it takes years to turn a syllabus around. It's like an ocean tanker, because if you put something new in, you've got to take something out. And we're so wedded to many of the things we're teaching, which, of course, as Ken Robinson said in his famous #1 TED Talk of all time, these are not the things we need to be teaching. We have no idea what the world's going to be like in 20 years' time, with AI coming along, AGI coming along, and superintelligence. Within probably 10 years, there'll be machines that are brighter than we are. Well, what's that going to do to the world? Where do we end up? We don't know. And we're still teaching children in, the private schools in the UK, they're still learning Latin. Well, who knows? But, learning arithmetic, is that still worth it when we don't have to do calculation? Is it worth learning stuff at all other than reasoning, problem solving, creativity, imagination, innovation, confidence, all of these kind of things we could be teaching children, and then they can pick up whatever they need to pick up and learn it whenever they need to. But I would say added to that, focus, concentrate, your presence. I mean, being a conscious human being as opposed to sitting there doom scrolling on a screen, that is becoming a zombie. And we have a huge number of people in the world now who are kind of sleepwalking through life in that way, which again, I think is a contributor to the problem, not listening to anybody, looking at stuff. Oh, there's another Pussycat video on, I think we've transcended that now, haven't we? But it's more kind of, well, look at that car just missing that person, or whatever it may be on TikTok. That's not life. That is being sucked into giving your attention to those big companies. And that's what they want, because you are the product, and losing your humanity, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, so much there. I remember I was being interviewed in a grad class a little under a decade ago, and I was talking about the importance of. They said if you could, like, you had a magic wand and you could change one thing, what would you change about this place? And I said I would slow it down so we could be more powerfully present with each other because we're doing great work and everybody has, is in a on the right path in terms of a mission and all that, but it's like there's so much happening so quickly. You were talking about like that Sesame Street effect, and I was like, I would just slow it down so we could have more presence, being powerfully present, and deeper connection, that intimacy versus the intensity. It just like came to me. It just was in the moment, and I was like, whew. Yeah, I feel like we need that more in society, not just at that one institution.
So true. And that's exactly what we need. But, it's like trying to slow down anything. These things are inevitable processes, they're part of the scale of humanity. I think the whole problem we've got comes down to largely that one word, scale. People doing things can be very harmless in tiny numbers, but scale that up to millions or billions, and you have a huge problem, especially with density, scale and density. They create these pressures, and there's so much money to be made. I mean, money, of course, is the other big driver of all of this. It's the reason there's so many people out there desperate for eyeballs in the world. And the way to seize eyeballs, given that everybody's competing, you get ahead in this race for grabbing attention. It's an aggressive attention grab going on, which is taking people away from things that take time to be considered. And it's taking people away, as you completely rightly say, from being present. And these organizations don't want us present. They want us zombified and just staring gormlessly at their endless content so they can monetize us and sell us as eyeballs to somebody else. So, these pressures are enormous. It's like trying to say, I mean, you see this with AI right now. People are saying, well, we're going too fast. I mean, I was at TED watching Chris Anderson interviewing, what's his name, the ChatGPT founder. And it was very interesting. I mean, he was a lovely guy. I thought he was a very nice guy, but I thought he was rather blasé when he said, "Oh, we are taking many precautions." Well, no, I don't think so, because you've got to be going faster than the Chinese and the other people out there. And if you have to cut a corner to be faster and to get there in advance, you're doing it. There's no way anybody can slow that down. It's like you can't turn back technology. You can't say technology, let's just have 5 years and think about this. It's not going to happen. So unfortunately, a lot of these forces are bigger than any individual person or even group of people can be. They're such strong, powerful forces. And the end result is lack of consciousness. It's a reduction in human consciousness and human presence and relationship, depth of relationship. And things like, I mean, I think I saw this in a TED talk years ago as well. The only two things that are correlated with human happiness in a causative way, it's not money, it's not reputation. It's only two things: service, so doing nice things for other people, and relationships, strength of community or relationship around you, whether that's family or community or maybe work, wherever it is that you're in a community. Those two things are what make us happy. And we are divorcing ourselves from both of them big time. Sitting there doom scrolling, you're not serving anybody. It's kind of the opposite. It's enormously isolated. And, the whole thing of relationships breaking down. I mean, Sherry Turkle, I met at TED, and her lovely TED talk and her great book, which is called Alone Together. And the second one is called Reclaiming Conversation. She's on the same page with this as well. She's a professor at MIT who was a great proponent of technology originally, but then she realized actually what technology is doing is not creating this beautiful global village where we can all connect. It's fragmenting our relationships. It's creating the scenario of a family sitting around a meal table, all looking at their hands, nobody talking to anybody because they're all communicating with somebody they hardly know a long way away, as opposed to, actually interacting in a deeper relationship, which is meaningful. So yes, I agree with you completely, Chad. This is about consciousness, fundamentally. If you boil it down, it's a conversation about human consciousness. And that's listening is fundamental to that.
You have in your TED Talk on listening, you have the acronym RASA, RASA. Is that right? Can you share what that stands for and about that in more depth?
Yeah, it's a useful little tool to remember. It's the Sanskrit word for juice, rasa, which is handy, but it's in this context it's an acronym, and it stands for receive, appreciate, summarize, ask. So receive means paying attention to the person who's speaking. Now in the West, at least, that means constant eye contact from the listener, not from the speaker, because it's kind of intimidating if you're having a conversation with somebody, not virtual like this, because you're looking at me and I'm looking at you the whole time. We're both looking at a camera, really. But if you're face to face with somebody and they're speaking to you and they stare at you all the while, that's a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Actually, it's one of the things that is unnatural about most TV is that you'll always get two people standing almost nose to nose talking to each other and staring at each other the whole time. That's not how we behave, really. It's kind of, whoa, do you mind backing off a bit? But the listener is looking at the speaker all the time. The speaker will be looking around and just checking back from time to time to make sure the listener's still there. But as you're thinking, you're talking and this is completely natural. And then, there you are. Yeah, you're still listening to me. So that's receive. It's pay attention, look at the person, body language, facing towards them, not feet pointing for the door or, angling away or leaning back and being bored. If we're leaning slightly forward, it's showing attention, attentiveness, and so forth. The A is appreciate. So that is doing what you're doing, which is nodding, facial movements, eyebrow raises, head bobs, smiles, whatever it may be, just to show that you're actually in the conversation. The S is summarize, which is the word so, a very important little word that got terribly abused for quite a long time, actually, the word so. You'd see people come onto a TED stage and start with the word so, or in any conversation. What's your name? So, I'm John. What? The word so means therefore. You're John because I asked you? Is that so? You weren't John before? Confusing to me because so is a very important word, and I'm happy to try and reclaim it. When you're using the word so, you're summarizing. So, Chad, let me just get this right. What you just said is this. Did I get you? Or, so, guys, I think we've all agreed this. Now we can move on to the next thing. If you don't have a so person in a meeting, it can be a very long meeting going round and round and round. Very important word. Closes doors in the long corridor of a conversation. You're locking stuff down behind you. And the A is appreciate, is ask. So that's just asking questions. Largely, ideally, open-ended questions. Why, what, which, when, where, how, who, which do not permit the answer yes or no. Although I would give a caveat, actually. I've tempered this a little bit since that TED talk with a slight warning on the why, because why can be quite intimidating and confrontational. Chad, why aren't you wearing a jacket? Or, Chad, I see you're not wearing a jacket. Is it particularly warm there today? Totally different landing, especially in the why aren't you or why didn't you? That's, it's got a lot of inherent blame in it. So it's useful to be a little bit cautious with the why, which can be a little bit interrogative and blaming. But the rest of the questions are very, very useful. And they can be tremendous bridges. People often ask me how to make a connection with somebody who doesn't listen to them or with somebody they know very well. Well, if you practice rasa, first of all, you're giving them attention. And the best way to teach somebody to listen is to listen to them. And secondly, if you ask the questions, so Chad, that's fascinating. What is it about nuclear physics that you think applies in my field, which is, health? Maybe nothing, but at least I'm trying to make a bridge there, asking the question to try and create a little bridge where we can find some common ground there, perhaps something we can both talk about. I mean, that was a silly example, but there are many more practical ways you can do that in a conversation with somebody where the common ground is more obvious. So rasa, very powerful. A man once told me after I'd done a workshop with him, he came back and he said, that saved my marriage. So it can be quite a good tool, that one, particularly for people who don't find listening natural to them, who do a lot of partial listening or distracted listening, which can be very dismissive and demeaning to somebody else. It's quite upsetting if you're trying to communicate and somebody won't look at you or is always doing something else. It doesn't, we've all got egos. But it's very nice to give the gift of real focused listening to somebody. It's a great gift to give, actually. So, guys listening to this, why don't you try that after this? Go and give somebody in your family and your work the gift of real listening. And I often say you might get the response, what are you doing?
What's happening here?
Yeah, we're not used to being listened to that well, but it is a lovely gift to give. And incidentally, parents, there's a really good tip I can give you. with children, be at eye level with the child. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and if I want to talk to her, I put her on my knee so we're eye to eye, or I will go down to her level and be eye to eye, kneeling down on the floor. But when you're 6 foot tall and you're dealing with somebody who's 2'6", their experience is this vast giant talking down to you. It's not a tremendous relationship builder. There's an imbalance there that is wonderful to level if you bring them to your level and you're just looking into their eyes. Because of course the best way to teach children how to listen is to listen to them.
Yeah, that speaks to modeling, right? Like the life we lead is the lesson we teach.
Very much so. Yeah. And that old terrible Victorian adage of children should be seen and not heard. What a terrible, disastrous thing to say about children. So I think children need to be heard very deeply. Otherwise, you're squashing them and repressing them and teaching them that they're insignificant, which is not a great way to bring up anybody, really.
Right. I mean, then that leads to like them trying to be heard. Like you were talking about hearing, feeling heard. You talked about validation earlier. Psychology building at Harvard University is in William James' name. And he talked about the importance of feeling heard. Like there's something so validating to our identity, our being, when I feel that you are paying attention to what I'm saying.
Hearing, listening in that way. I mean, I think it's said we want 3 things out of any relationship: to be heard, understood, and valued. Those 3 things. And listening is the critical skill in achieving those things, because it's difficult. I mean, you can hear people perhaps, but if you're listening, you're hearing it in a much more attentive way. And understanding is always the result, I say in all my talks and in all my work. Conscious listening always creates understanding, even if you don't agree. You might get to the fairly advanced level of relationship where you realize that 2 people can have very different points of view, and both be right, because they've got different perspectives, different backgrounds, different values, beliefs, whatever it may be. We all listen through a set of filters, and those filters create different perspectives and different listenings, different views. So once you get that, you can let other people be right and still disagree with them. You don't have to tell them they're wrong. And from time to time, you might even realize that you were wrong and they are in fact right.
Yeah.
It took me quite a long time to get to that point of view. I went to a private school in the UK, which they're very good at teaching you how to be an incredibly convincing bullshitter and sound enormously authoritative about everything, whether you know about it or not. And also to have a very high regard for your own opinion, and often to conflate, which many people do, opinions with facts and get rather fond of, very attached to opinions. I had a wonderful conversation with a friend of mine who's a very popular guy on Substack, and he was talking about opinions as a mapping of what happens in science. Because in science, nothing is proven. There are no facts in science. There are theories that are currently the best explanation of a phenomenon until the next better explanation comes along. But if you're completely wedded to the current best explanation, as has often happened in science actually, when the next better explanation comes along, it's resisted or debunked, or you only have to think of Galileo and so forth, where it's very important not to be too wedded, to be relaxed, to hold opinions lightly in your hands. This is my current opinion. You don't agree? Oh, that's interesting. Why would that be? Let's test that. No, I think I'm still going to stay with my opinion actually on that, but I respect yours. Or, wow, I didn't think of that. And then things move on, things change. That's how we grow. But if we're holding on grimly and tightly to all of these assumptions, opinions, beliefs that we've created, we get ossified, we get very confrontational as well. And that again is a progenitor of conflict. I mean, you have to look at Putin. I mean, it's not a great model for leadership to surround yourself with people who all agree with you the whole time, which we've got in both America and Russia at the moment, sadly. In Russia, if you don't agree with Putin, you get thrown out of a window. In America, if you don't agree with Trump, you get sacked. It's a softer landing. Nevertheless, you're out. And that means that we have people who are being reinforced in very ossified positions. They may be right about certain things. They may be wrong about other things, but they're not going to change. And to me, one of the most important things in any organization, government, company, I train people on this, is being willing to listen to challenge, because that's how we change. That's how we grow. That's how we innovate. That's how we react to a changing world. So it's really important not to have a leadership team who are all like you and think the same way. It's easy to do that. It's lovely. You have a whole bunch of people around a boardroom table or in a team who all are on the same page. Everybody's gung-ho about this. Everybody thinks that. Really, you need the hang on person at the back where everybody goes, oh no, it's that person again. And then they go, you can't do that because of this. Oh no, come on. You know what? They're right. And if we'd all gone and done that, I mean, I've had organizations, I've led organizations where this has been the case. And, we've avoided some huge potholes and disasters because of the hang on person. My old friend David Firth wrote a lovely book called The Corporate Fool, which is about exactly this, the importance of having somebody who is allowed to challenge. The fool in the courts of old England was the one person who was allowed to take the piss out of the king. And it wasn't just to do that. It was because, as David says, he's not committed to the king. He's committed to the king better. Now that's a cool concept, because he would always challenge what the king's doing to see if there's a better way. And if you don't have that challenge, you do what Kodak did when digital cameras came along. People will always need photography and film. No, they won't. And corporate history is littered with the carcasses of organizations that did not have effective challenge going on, that couldn't reinvent themselves and adapt and so forth and innovate. So that's an important form of listening. It's a kind of diversity, if you like. And I know we've all got very conscious of diversity in different ways. Well, I'm talking here about diversity of opinion. That's just as important, I think, as skin color, religion, sexual orientation, whatever it might be. Neurodiversity. These things are all very important. So is diversity of perspective, opinion, having that challenge going on. Because without it, we have an organization that's doomed fundamentally.
Race to nowhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Julian, I know you have things to do, but I literally could talk to you, listen to you all day.
Oh, thank you, Jared.
So as we're coming up on time, where can people find you and your work? I know you've got a new book out. Any thoughts there that you want to share, as well as any closing thoughts for the audience?
Well, the main encouragement is simply to start listening, to be conscious that listening is a skill, and it's something, take it on, become a great listener, because it's a great advantage to be a great listener in life, as a parent, a leader, a friend, a family member, anything, a salesperson. Listening is so, so critical. And if we just ignore it, we are living half a life, in my opinion. So take on the skill, build the skill. My book is called Sound Affects, with an A, as in sound affects you. So it's all about the power of sound, lots of reasons to listen, in the wonders of sound on our planet and even in space, and also lots of tips about listening better, becoming a more conscious listener. And the whole last chapter actually is about silence, which is something that's quite important. We're losing contact with silence in the modern world. So Sound Affects, it's available on all the usual places. And little plea from me, guys, if you go out and buy the book, please do. And if you enjoy it, which I hope you will, please would you leave a review on Amazon? Because for some reason, we're not getting many reviews. I know so many people who say they've loved the book and absolutely love it. And I keep saying, please review it. It's probably part of our busy world. People just don't take time. Anyway, that's a little plea from me. And the other thing is the Listening Society. So yeah, I have a website, juliantreasure.com, of course. So if you want to talk to me about keynotes or workshops or coaching or anything like that, very happy to do that. The Listening Society is my mission for the rest of my life. It's an online community. I've put all my training courses in there. I've put masses of podcasts and recordings and files and research. And I mean, it's already very rich, and it's going to get more and more as more people join. We've only just launched it. So you can find that and have a free membership of it to try it out. I'll send you a link for that you can put in the show notes. So all of your listeners, with my compliments, have a 3 months membership of the Listening Society and see if you like it. The only thing you won't be able to touch with the 3 month is the training courses. They're paywalled out for paying members. But when you join and you want to pay, it's not very much. It's £1 a day, less than £1 a day to be a member. So it's not a critical decision. And there's so much richness in there. So come along, join us in the Listening Society, and let's generate listening in the world, because it needs it.
Make us more fully conscious human beings.
Quite.
Thank you so much for your time, your insights, and your energy out in the world, and specifically in coming on this podcast to share these with me and my audience today, Julian. I so deeply appreciate it.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to get that message out there. So I hope it's landing. Happy listening, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you liked it, please share with a friend on social media. That goes a long way to promoting this podcast so I can continue to interview and share these conversations with fascinating people. You can follow me on social media, Chad Stoloff, and visit my website, chadstoloff.wordpress.com, for more information. I'd love it if you would leave a review to support the podcast. Thanks so much. Until next time.